The forest fire season has started early this year. If you've seen any news this week, you know that roughly 5,000 people are evacuated from Fort Nelson and the neighboring First Nation because their homes are threatened by the Parker Lake fire. Weather conditions have become more favorable in the past few days, but they're not out of the woods yet, so to speak. Further east, there were another 6,000 odd people under evacuation order in the Fort McMurray area until yesterday, with another wildfire dangerously close. It has been deemed safe enough for those folks to go home, although the fire continues to burn. And it's only May. Unless large swaths of our province and beyond get significant rainfall soon, it could be a long summer. In a story about journeying to the pole of relative inaccessibility, Annie Dillard once wrote, "On the whole, I do not find Christians sufficiently sensible of conditions. Does anyone have the foggiest idea what sort of power we so blithely invoke? Or, as I suspect, does no one believe a word of it? The churches are children, playing on the floor with their chemistry sets, mixing up a batch of TNT to kill a Sunday morning. It's madness to wear ladies' straw hats and velvet hats to church. We should all be wearing crash helmets. Ushers should issue life preservers and signal flares. They should lash us to our pews. For the sleeping God may wake someday and take offense, or the waking God may draw us out to where we can never return." I suspect with our celebration of Pentecost today that Dillard's observations are more true than usual. Today we hear of how God's Spirit comes with wind, the rush of a violent wind, to be exact, and fire. Divided tongues as of fire appear among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. Wind and fire, a terrifying combination. I don't think, need the protective equipment that Dillard describes in her boating metaphor, life preservers and signal flares. We could, however, perhaps use some flame-resistant clothing, fire helmets and masks to protect our lungs from all the smoke. Fire and wind are a terrifying combination. Just ask the people of Fort Nelson, or Lytton, or Lahaina in the island of Maui, or various places in Australia, Greece, Quebec, or California, or West Kelowna. Ask the campers, parents, and staff of Oasi, the Anglican camp on Okanagan Lake that was destroyed by fire last summer. The people of Solista and Scotch Creek on the north shore of Shuswap Lake, or the thousands living under the fear and uncertainty of evacuation orders last year and who are doing so already this year. The rush of a violent wind can spread a wildfire 20 kilometers an hour, giving people in its path mere minutes to get out of the way or get caught. Forest fire season has started early this year. Then again, I also read recently that last year's fire season actually never ended. A report at the end of March indicated that in BC alone, there continued to be roughly 90 so-called zombie fires left over from the 2023 season. These are fires that continue to smolder underground, under the snow. A Vancouver Sun report described it as, quote, "a grim new normal, wreaking havoc in northern countries like Canada." It means fire seasons that never end. And the danger is that as the snow melts, and if the drought continues as temperatures rise, those smoldering fires could flare up, posing a threat to land and humankind alike. Sure seems like creation is groaning, and we can only hope that it is groaning in labor pains, that a new birth is underway. Now, as scary and uncontrollable and dangerous as fire is, it turns out it's also necessary for renewal. It's necessary for life to flourish. We haven't always kind of realized this. The first national park wardens were actually called fire and game guardians, being hired beginning in 1909. Primarily, their role was to extinguish wildfires. Now, what they, meaning we, didn't realize is that without the renewal of fire, biodiversity of our forests decreases considerably. One study out of Florida showed that it was up to a 90% decrease over years without fire in a particular area. Fire is needed to free native species from competition with invasive weeds, to eliminate disease, and to kill destructive insects, like the mountain pine beetle that has done so much damage to forests in BC and Alberta. And more, without regular fires, dead and decaying matter builds up on the forest floor, creating the risk of more intense and more dangerous fires in the future. Now, having kind of learned all this over years, Parks Canada now uses a variety of tools, including prescribed burns, to help restore the natural renewal process of fire. In 2018, the year after the Keno wildfire should have destroyed Waterton Village in the little corner of Alberta, BC, and Montana, I went to see the impact of that fire for myself. Most of the trails were closed that year, with the majority of the infrastructure outside the town site burned to the ground. The hike to Bertha Lake was one of the few that was open, and hiking it was an incredible experience. The path wended its way through untouched green vegetation and scorched black earth, sometimes just on opposite sides of the path. In some places, there were this amazing green and purple carpet with black sticks reaching for the sky that are burned out trees. There were amazing views down the lake through much of the trail because there had been previously trees standing there, but that had been burned. Returning year by year, I've witnessed the regrowth of the ecosystem from the ground up, with the green growing higher each year. The worst hit areas, where life was fully reduced to ash and just stumps of trees, they have gradually seen the return of green things and wildflowers blooming, poking up from the black ground. You can see a slideshow of some of those pictures out in the narthex at coffee time. Today, we celebrate the coming of God's Spirit with wind and fire at Pentecost. And we pray for this Spirit, the power and energy of God, to fill and move us. Do we have any idea how much we are playing with fire? Do we recognize how uncontrollable and dangerous it can be? Do we believe any of it at all? And what if we did? What if fire and wind meant renewal beyond our imagining? A truly terrifying possibility. Because wind and fire can change a landscape completely. And then who knows what new life might grow out of what is left behind.